Welcome back, welcome back. Events in Pakistan continue to move at bewildering speed. Today's news is that Benazir Bhutto has been released from house arrest, apparently, and that a new interim Prime Minister has been sworn in. Earlier this week, we saw the arrest of the leader of the Movement for Justice Party, Imran Khan, and I'm delighted to be joined now by Jemima Khan, the former wife of the cricketer turned politician, as they say. What's the latest? What's the latest you've heard about Imran?
Latest I've heard was that overnight they moved him to another jail. He had been in a jail in his hometown of Lahore, and because there'd been large protests outside the jail, led by his sisters, who were then subsequently arrested too, they've now moved him to a jail in interior Punjab somewhere, and there's obviously much less access. And I'm not actually even sure what the name of the jail is or where particularly it is. I just know that they bundled him into a van, put handcuffs on him, and 12 hours later he arrived at a new jail.
Oh, I see. And the charges were a shock, weren't they, too? I mean, they were rather swingeing terrorism charges.
Yes, he's been charged with state terrorism, which is a non-bailable offence. So the object, I assume, is to keep him silent and in jail for as long as possible. But obviously it also carries the death penalty. So it was shocking that he's gone to such lengths to keep Imran silent.
Did you expect him to be arrested? Well, he had to be found first. He was found at the student.
Yes, I wasn't surprised that he was arrested. I knew in advance that he was going to head this student protest in Punjab University. So that wasn't a particular surprise, but the charges are a surprise, and the relative brutality with which they arrested him. I mean, I've now heard reports that he was beaten before he was handed over to the police by students who were allied to Musharraf. I've heard that he's being kept in solitary confinement. He hasn't got access to lawyers or visitors. So that's come as a shock, but not the actual arrest, because we knew if he came out of hiding, he was likely to be arrested, along with anyone who opposes Musharraf's rule.
Is there a danger of torture or not?
Well, there's a danger because we've heard of instances where other lawyers, where other people who've been arrested, including lawyers, have been tortured. There's a lawyer called Etzaz Essen, who is another very vocal opponent, and he's apparently, I've heard that he's been tortured in one of the jails. So it's obviously a worry whether they dare do it to Imran, because Imran has such a kind of high public profile, particularly in the West, internationally. So I would hope that they wouldn't dare do that.
And in terms of the boys, Suleiman and Qasim, I mean, how much of all this do you tell them?
Well, I had to tell them. I had to tell them that he'd been arrested because it was in the newspapers and someone was bound to say it at school. So my younger one's pretty oblivious, and my older son is anxious and distracted and definitely has taken it on board. I mean, I tried to make light of it when I tell them, saying, oh, look, all Pakistani politicians go to jail, it's necessary. But then, you know, obviously they notice, they pick up on my concern and the fact that I'm now worried about the charges that have been levelled. So, yeah, my older one's definitely, you could say, is anxious.
And I suppose the situation, what else can you do to help the situation? You're doing everything you can with the rally last weekend and so on. It's just making people aware of the situation, I suppose. That's all you can do, isn't it?
Yeah, but particularly as people don't have the right to demonstrate there. If they do demonstrate, they're immediately beaten, arrested, detained or forced into hiding. So we're organising another demonstration this Sunday. This time it'll be outside the Pakistan High Commission. And it's to just continue to make as much noise as possible to send a message that we're watching what's happening, that it's not acceptable, and that the government here need to continue to put as much pressure as possible on Musharraf to stand down and to restore judiciary, restore democratic conditions in the country.
And in terms of the replacement of Musharraf, really he needs to be detached, presumably, from the army. As long as the army supports him, there's not much that can be done, is there?
Exactly.
So that's a big step that needs to be taken.
But I think, regardless of the army and his position as head of the army, I feel that Musharraf now has to go. I mean, I don't think he's got any credibility left. I don't think his position is sustainable. I mean, the whole country is up in arms.
And in fact, coming up this week, the Commonwealth heads of government meetings and so on. I suppose if they took a firm line and expelled Pakistan for the time being from the Commonwealth, that would be a helpful move, wouldn't it?
Be helpful, but he doesn't seem to be. He seems to be pretty impervious to international pressure at the moment. He's making quite defiant noises in the face of any kinds of international threats. But let's see. I mean, all pressure is useful, and those countries, you know, particularly the US and to a lesser extent the UK, have huge influence in that region. So the more pressure they can apply and the more sustained pressure they can apply, then I do think it can have some effect.
Because he seems to be resisting hints from America even at the moment, or appears to be, doesn't he?
Yeah, he seems to be fairly defiant.
Yeah. And so, what are your feelings about him now? I mean, do you see him as just as a symbol, or specifically, do you resent and blame him for what's happened?
Yeah, I blame Musharraf for imposing martial law. I mean, there was no call for that. That was purely to sustain his own dictatorial rule. There was no other reason for it. It's not because he was, I mean, his great excuse that he's facing that this was all to counter terrorism in Pakistan is just completely disingenuous. It's a lie.
Yeah.
There's no question that this was about terrorism or extremism. This was purely about his own rule and trying to get round a judicial system which was not in favour of him prolonging his rule and being head of the army and president. And
do you think, in fact, that there will be, as he says, elections now in January, and do you think they can go on while there's this martial law situation? Well, do you think Imran's going to be able to stand in those elections?
No, I don't think. Well, how can you? The thing is, it's pointless even talking about elections at this point. You've got a media who are completely gagged. You've got all the opposition in jail. It's just there are no democratic conditions for an election. You can't have free and fair elections like this. So I would say the issue of elections is it's sort of irrelevant at this point.
What? And so it all waits until Musharraf goes, I suppose.
Musharraf goes, or he decides to stand by the institutions in Pakistan and restore the judiciary, and as I've said, restore democracy, release political prisoners, and free the media.
Good list. Thank you very much indeed, Jemima. Our thoughts are very much with you and with Imran and with the 2 boys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, now, it's been a significant week for all of us here at Al Jazeera English, and for you too, I hope too, because this channel is celebrating its first anniversary. Doesn't time fly, as someone once said. It's a year in which we on Frost Over the World welcomed guests from 11 prime ministers, 7 presidents, a smattering of Nobel Prize winners, Oscar-winning directors and actors, and a host of others too numerous to mention. But Al Jazeera English is a lot more than this programme alone. In fact, there's 175 hours a week that are not accounted for just by this programme. So what are the goals, and have they been achieved in the past year? Marwan Bishara is here with us now, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. Al Jazeera English is indeed. Now, would you say, what were the objectives, would you say, and how far have they been achieved by this channel?
Well, originally the objective, Sir David, was to internationalize a successful model, and that was Al Jazeera Arabic. Now, Al Jazeera Arabic, I think, was misunderstood throughout the world, but was quite understood in the Arab world. And it was really very simple. The people who headed the channel gave the possibility for journalists and producers to release their creativity and their freedom of expression, to be able to put together what turned out to be the best Arab-speaking channel in the Middle East. It mostly put power in check. It grilled power. It asked a lot of questions, and hence it was not allowed in half of the Arab countries. This model was to be internationalized. Internationalized meaning not translated, of course, means transformed, meaning that same model from bottom up, releasing that kind of creativity and putting international power in check became the goal of, or the mission of, Al Jazeera English. And in that sense, it filled a vacuum. There was a vacuum out there in satellite 24-hour news where that voice that comes from the periphery, from the south, from the so-called the voiceless, wasn't there in international satellites. And Al Jazeera English provides that.
That's right. Now, Al Jazeera English provides that, as you use that word, international. That's the key. That whereas Al Jazeera Arabic naturally has an Arabic point of view, the point of view of this channel is really international, isn't it? And bringing stuff from parts of the world that you don't get much of, like when we had the President Lula of Brazil. I mean, he's a very important man, most powerful man in South America, but not seen on television in the West very much indeed. So where do you go from here? Well,
it's precisely those type of coverages that we had throughout this year, as you mentioned. The way we covered the Argentinian elections, the way we covered the Turkish elections. All the other satellite networks that I watched covered the Turkish elections as if they were elections between headdress and bikinis. We sent out 70 people out there between the English and the Arabic channel and said, no, this is far more complex, far more nuanced, and hence we covered it in a way that is far more intelligent, I believe, in a way that shows the diversity of Turkish politics and culture. We did the same thing in Africa, we did the same thing in the Islamic world in general, and we did it in Latin America. We succeeded in bringing out the diversity of people, of cultures, of politics, rather than the evil versus the good, the North versus the South. We were able to diversify, we were able to show the complexity in the world, and yet simplify it to our viewers throughout the world.
And so how would you summarize the target now? Established in year one, I mean, expanding in India and America, I suppose, is part of it, but what's the next target for Al Jazeera English?
I think we're going to have to do more of the same, but better. Meaning, we did reach out. We need to be available in more households, that's for sure. Certainly in places like the United States and Europe. We need to be, of course, in more households in the South, meaning we have to reach out to our viewers. I believe that's going to be key for us. But more importantly, we have to be able to release that kind of creativity and innovation through our journalists, through our networks. You know, we have 150 people in Washington alone. We have more than 150 people in London, and the same thing in Kuala Lumpur and in Doha throughout the Middle East. We have correspondents in almost every other country in the world, something never seen in 24-hour news. Hence, we are conquering the new frontiers of journalism. I believe you once put it that way. So I believe we're going to be doing more of the same, and we're going to try to be that voice that has been missing from other satellite TVs.
Perfect summary. Thank you very much, Marwan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us there. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this week. Next week, as we go into the second year of Al Jazeera English, we'll be in Uganda for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, known as CHOGM. And in a special programme, I'll be talking to the President of Uganda, the Prime Ministers of Antigua and Bangladesh, and the Secretary General of the Commonwealth. Do hope you can join us then for that special programme. Until then, from us both, goodbye for now.